All right, here we are back inside the Ringo and Submarine illustration. I've gone ahead and saved my progress as subtract and exclude.ai, found inside the 10 Pathfinder folder. So called, by the way, because currently I've got Ringo selected. You can see that I've assigned the exclude Pathfinder operation, whereas if I go ahead and meatball the fin path right there, you can see that I've assigned minus front. A couple of versions ago, minus front was known as subtract, and unite was known as add. And even though unite and minus front tell the story, I think add and subtract are a little bit more memorable. So sometimes I like to think of them that way. Anyway, inside of this exercise, we're going to take this dynamic compound shape and we're going to convert it into a more static compound path. And we'll see what that means, and then I'll try to give you a sense of why you'd want to do such a thing. Go ahead and meatball the compound shape item, and notice what we've got here. I've got the compound shape twirled open so that we can see each of the paths inside of that object. Now go up here to the Pathfinder panel. Notice you've got an expand button. When you click on it, compound shape is replaced by compound path, and we no longer have access to the paths inside. And that's because they've been cut apart and they're now considered to be subpaths, which are beyond the reach of the layers panel. However, we can still gain access to them, either using the wide arrow tool, which allows you to select independent subpaths inside of a compound path. You can select all kinds of things inside things using the wide arrow. Or I could switch to the black arrow tool, and I could double-click on any one of these paths in order to enter the isolation mode. Up here at the top of the screen, we can see that the current isolated object is a compound path, which appears on a layer called up above, and so on. So you can see an entire hierarchy of objects up here at the top of the screen. When you're working inside the isolation mode, you also have the option of editing the isolated object independently of everything else inside of your illustration, and you can do so using the black arrow tool. So, for example, I could grab Ringo's head right there and move it to a different location, and I could move the front portion of the submarine over here. I could move the bottom portion of the right shoe, the bottom portion of the left shoe, the inside of the legs, the aft end of the submarine, and even the fin as well to a different location. Now notice I'm no longer getting an exclusion relationship between that fin and that aft end. And I can fix this if I want. If I want the fin to cut a hole in the aft end, the way that it's really typically supposed to inside of a compound path, you may remember this strange esoteric technique. You go up to the window menu, you choose the attributes command to bring up the attributes panel. You make sure that it's expanded so you can see more than the overprint options. And you switch from the utterly and completely obscure use non-zero winding fill rule option to the equally obscure use even odd fill rule. And that goes ahead and gives you a rudder-shaped hole, if you desire such a thing. However, when you look at this, you might think, well, gosh, why in the world would you possibly do this? Why would you take that great compound shape that we had a moment ago and cut it into pieces to make this compound path, which is not only a big mess, but also you have to use these weird options over here inside the attributes panel, which don't make any sense, whereas otherwise we could have used these really great options here inside the Pathfinder panel. Well, strange as it may sound, most of the time when you're combining paths together using Pathfinder operations, you're going to merge them into standard everyday average paths or compound paths as opposed to compound shapes. And just to give you a sense, I'll switch over to this final treegraphic.ai file that we're going to be building together. This file, once again, found inside the 10 Pathfinder folder. If you go ahead and twirl open that drawing layer here inside the layers panel, you'll see that the entire tree is one big compound path, because to have it be a big compound shape would be unwieldy, and there really wouldn't be any advantage to having all these various objects separated into independent path outlines. Whereas when you have a fairly simple collection of objects like this moon right there, that's when you might want to work with a compound shape. And in fact, this crescent object right there, you can twirl it open and you'll see it is a collection of 4 objects interacting with each other. And that eye object on top, if you twirl it open, it's another compound shape that contains yet another nested compound shape. So either we have something very simple where Illustrator is concerned, just this big old compound path outline for the tree, which is fairly complicated in terms of, having several anchor points inside of it, or we have this very simple looking path outline right there that's actually a collection of 3 nested compound shapes working together. Anyway, that gives you a preview of what we're going to be doing inside of this chapter. In the next exercise, we are going to actually set about drawing the tree.